Please remember that the complete information for the class that you are about to view is at elithecomputerguy.com. Not only do we have our videos there, but we have part lists, diagrams, pictures, and even complete code examples. So if you are watching this video and you want more information, please go to elithecomputerguy.com. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy, and in today's class we're going to be playing a game of Where's the Server? So basically I came up with this project idea thinking about in the modern world of IT tech support, the question of where are your servers actually located? When you use IaaS services, infrastructure as a service, when you use platform as a service, when you use software as a service, in the modern world it is starting to become more and more important to know where the servers are physically located. It may be important for you just for just general peace of mind, or depending what country you're in, it may be important for you for actual regulatory compliance. So if you're dealing with things like medical records or credit scores or that type of thing, it may be important that when you store data somewhere up on the cloud, that physical location that you're storing the data is within a certain geographic region. So what I've done today is I've created a little project where what we can do is we can plug in a domain name. So we can plug in facebook.com, we can plug in salesforce.com, we can plug in elithecomputerguy.com. Basically what is going to happen is as a PHP script is then going to resolve the domain name that we give it to an IP address, and then we are going to use a geolocation API to then show us where that IP address is located. So basically what's going to happen is we're going to plug in the domain name, we are going to resolve the domain name to an IP address, then our script is going to go out to this API and say, hey, where is this IP address actually physically located? And then that is going to be spit out onto the screen. So this is just a little simple project, something that's relatively easy for you to do at home to start to give you the idea of how powerful these kind of IP APIs can be, and for you to start thinking about how you might want to use these in your particular projects. So basically, today what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the actual demonstration of the project that we're going to create. We'll go to the whiteboard so I can kind of explain exactly what's going on, and then we'll go take a look at the code. So there's really only two warnings for today's class, and they're the basic warnings you should be thinking about whenever you use any IT products or services, especially when you're using something like an API. The first one is garbage in, garbage out. So what we're going to be doing today is we're simply going to be querying somebody else's database. So we're going to be using this API to query somebody else's database, and we're simply going to be saying, hey, within your database, where is this IP address geographically located? And then they're going to give us the results, right? Well, the thing is, we're not using any real fancy technology here. We're not using quantum computers. We're not using AI or machine learning or 5G or anything else. We're just saying, hey, this IP address, what do you have in your database? So one of the problems you can run into when you start using basically these kind of IP geographic services is if the database that you are querying is frankly kind of crappy, the results that you're going to be getting are going to be kind of crappy. So you have to be very, very careful about this, especially if you're going to start using this type of product in a production environment. So something to be thinking about. What I'm going to be showing you today, right? Basically all we're going to be doing is we're going to be spitting out the geographic location of the IP address of where the server is located. Well, basically you could use what I'm going to be showing you today to do things like prevent people from coming to your website. So again, imagine in this modern world, you're worried about, like, let's say foreign people or people from certain areas of the world coming to your website for any number of legal reasons. Companies like Netflix, companies like Hulu use this to basically kind of region block their service. Well, let's say somebody's coming to your site and you want to say, I don't want anybody from, let's say, China to be able to come to my site for whatever reason. Let's say something that you have on your site may be illegal in China, so you just don't want to deal with the legal ramifications. So one of the things that you could do is you could say, okay, every time somebody comes to my site, I am going to query this database to ask what country are they coming from. If they're coming from China, I will simply block. So basically the PHP script will run. If you're not in China, you will get the website. If you are in China, you'll get spit somewhere else. Well, remember, Garbage in, garbage out, right? If you go to the database using the API, and basically they have bad or just simply wrong information in their database, you may start blocking people that rightfully should be able to get into your website, and you may start allowing people into your website that you want to be blocked. So basically, when we talk about this geography and this IP address system, all this is a database type system. So again, the quality of the database is going to determine the quality of the output. And so really think about this from a production type level. Again, do you want to start blocking people from your website if the database that you're using may not have the highest quality content in there? Something to be very careful about. The other thing to be thinking about, especially when you start thinking about going into a production environment, is do remember you get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. Again, I get a lot of noobs coming to my classes and they don't want to pay for anything, right? Linux is free and LibreOffice is free and all this stuff is free. Why should I pay for anything, right? Trying to explain to a noob why they should spend $50 on a client access license for Windows Server will just make you lose your mind, right? Like trying to explain how useful Microsoft Active Directory is, and that $50 for a client access license is just like an irrelevant amount of money. Trying to explain that to a noob, you're gonna lose your mind, because they just don't want to pay anything, right? An important thing to realize, again, once you start dealing with APIs, is you get what you pay for. So the service that we're going to be using today, it is a free service, so you're legally allowed to use this for free, as far as I've been able to figure out, right? You can use this for free. But some things to be thinking about with this particular free service is, one, they massively limit your API calls. So you can actually only do 2 queries per second, which may seem a lot initially. But remember, if you're putting this on something like a website where you're having a decent amount of traffic come into your website, you could overload the API calls very quickly. So the first thing on a free service like this is simply that, you're very, very, very limited. Again, 2 API calls when you're doing a basic test like we're doing today, and that may seem like a lot. But again, if you're putting this on an actual website, it's something that you're going to have to think about. The other thing is, also, again, that garbage in, garbage out. Basically, the database that we're going to be using through this API is going to be the light version of the database. Right? So they have a pay-for service. They have a pay-for service. Costing anywhere between $50 to probably $5,000 if you want to pay for it. So right, you're getting this API service for free, but that pay-for service gets you the full, expanded, higher quality database in order to query with. And so one of the things you just have to realize here is with this particular database, it is the light database, so it may not be as accurate or as specific as you may want, again, if you're going into a production environment. But this is all the kind of stuff that you have to think about. Again, when you start thinking about things like total cost of ownership, when you start thinking about return on investment, these are the types of things that you have to consider as a real professional if you're going to be putting this into a production environment. What I'm going to be showing you today, though, is just a basic class on how to do this. So those are some things just to keep in mind. And again, a bit of a warning. So if you go and you plug in an IP address or you plug in a domain name and you know that the physical location is incorrect, just realize, yeah, it's not your code. Again, that's an important thing to understand. It's not your code. If it spits out a location, if it tells you San Francisco or if it tells you China, like if it spits out a location, your code is working. It's the database that may be garbage. So these are some things to keep in mind. So with that, let's go over to the demonstration computer so I can show you what the project is that we're going to be building today. Then, like I say, we'll go over to the whiteboard, explain how all of it works, and then I'll show you the code. Okay, so here we are at my demonstration computer, and look at this, my super sexy little web app here. So basically, I have a standard LAMP server running at 192.168.1.25, so it's simply an Ubuntu server. It has PHP and Apache installed, and really for what we're doing today, you don't need anything sophisticated in order to make this work. So basically what we have here is where's the server? It asks you for a domain, and so we can put in something such as facebook.com. So if we want to know where we're resolving to, if I'm going to connect to facebook.com, where is the server most likely going to reside, I can then click submit. We can then wait a little bit of time. There we go. And we can see where this resolves to and then where the most likely location for the server is. So Facebook.com is resolving to IP address 31.13.66.35. It is in the United States. It is in Virginia. It is in the city of Dulles. Here is most likely the zip code and even the lat, long, and time zone if you like. So it can give you this type of information. Basically down here, I do have var dump. So this is simply a var dump, dumping out everything within the variable. And the cool thing about this is basically what you get back from the API is an array. And so depending on what you want in your particular project, you can simply pull out whatever individual key you want from the array, right? So basically if you want something such as the city, so for whatever reason you're tracking cities, what you can do is you can simply come here and you can see that you have a key called city name, and you could simply pull out the city name. Or again, something larger, maybe something like country. So if you just simply want to pull out the country, you don't want to pull out all this additional information, you could simply pull out the country here. If we go and we do something such as salesforce.com, again, we can hit submit. This is then going to resolve for salesforce.com 136.147.40.2, and supposedly based on the database, this is in California, it's in San Francisco, supposedly at zip code 94105, so on and so forth. If you want to go and let's say do Tencent.com, so Tencent.com is a Chinese company, we can click Tencent.com and basically we will see what spits out here. So this may take a second. Again, this is going to be as long as it takes for the API. We are using a free, inexpensive, whatever, low quality API, so it may take you a couple of seconds here. So Tencent, it's resolving to 117.169.101. Country code is CN for China. Region name is Jiangxi. City name is Nanchang. Zip code, not sure if they have zip codes there, but they say they have a zip code there, lat and lon. So this is the information that we are going to be able to get out of this particular project. And again, now that you're able to pull this type of information out and actually assign it to be a value of a variable, then you can start to do some other interesting things. So with that, let's go over to the whiteboard so I can just kind of sketch out exactly what's going on here, and then I'll go and show you the code. Okay, so let's just map this out on the whiteboard so that you logically grasp what is going on, right? So the first thing is that we have an Ubuntu server, right? So I've basically just got a standard Ubuntu server, nothing that fancy on it. On that Ubuntu server, I have Apache and I have PHP. So Apache is going to be the web server for us, and then PHP is actually going to be doing the back-end translation, the back-end programming to allow us to do what we need to do. So what's going to happen here is basically I have created a little HTML form, and on that HTML form it's asking you for the domain. So basically it's got a little block here, so it says domain, and then you plug in the domain. What's going to happen is when you plug in the domain, this domain is going to be sent to the PHP, and what PHP is initially going to do is it's actually going to do a ping command. So from your computer, it's going to resolve the DNS of whatever domain name you've given it to an IP address. So we're going to use a command called shell_exec. And basically with shell_exec, you can send a command to the shell and then actually pull out the value of the result. So what we're going to say is ping whatever the domain name is, and then we're going to say only ping it once. And then what's going to happen is that ping is then going to give us basically a block of information, and then from that block of information, we are then going to pull out whatever the IP address then is, right? So 207.18.16.2, whatever else, right? So we send a ping using the shell, basically using the actual server itself to send the ping. We resolve to an IP address, and then once we have this IP address, now all we need to do is we need to query a database to say, hey, what does this IP address map to geographically? So today what we're going to be using is we're going to be using an API. So we're going to be using an API. And the nice thing with the particular API that we're using today is that they actually have a PHP script that you can download. So with PHP, you don't need any other programming language in order to do this. They have a PHP example. So what we're going to do is we're then going to feed this IP address to the API. That is then going to go to their server. In their server, essentially, they just have a massive database with all of these different IP addresses. They're going to find where this IP address is in the database, and then they're going to basically present that information. So that information is then going to be sent back to our web server as an array. Once it's an array, then we're simply going to print out the value of the array onto that particular web page. So this is how this essentially works. And so what's important here, again, when we talk about, garbage in and garbage out and you get what you pay for, the nice thing about this is once you understand how to do this, right, you can just use somebody else's API. Right? So if you use this and you're like, oh, wow, this is really useful, but it's not exactly accurate, right? Like literally all you have to do is, okay, fine, stop using their API, go and basically plug in somebody else's API and get a higher quality service. Or keep using their API, but then pay for their higher tier service so you get better quality, right? Then one of the things you also have to realize too, again, when we start talking about IP and geography mapping, is again, all of this is simply a database. So one of the things you can do too is you can simply buy a database. Basically, you can buy tables from particular companies. You can then import them into your own MySQL database server if you have it, and then instead of querying an API, you could just simply query your own MySQL database server. Because again, all it is, IP address, country, city, all that additional information, all it is basically a record in a database table. So whether it's in this API or whether you have it local, all you're essentially doing is simply querying that table. So this is essentially how this works. So let's go over and actually take a look at the code itself. So here we are back at my demonstration computer, and so for today what we're using for the API is IPinfoDB.com. So this is an API service. It is free, seems to work reasonably well. The big thing is the limit to you can only do 2 queries per second. If you try to push more than 2 queries per second, initially they'll simply block you for a little while, and then if you keep hammering away, they'll perma-block your IP address from being able to access their systems. So just kind of keep that in mind. Again, you're not going to be able to hammer the hell out of this free API, but again, from an educational standpoint, it's kind of useful to start playing around with his IP geographic services. So anyways, you can come down here. You can see this is some of the information they can give you for my IP address. Don't try to hack me or whatever, please. I'm an educator. I'm trying to teach you. It's always so funny. Whenever I do these types of classes, you'll see something like the IP address, and then I'll get all these like wannabe hackers, like, ha, I'm going to hack your IP. And you're like, can you please not? I'm giving you free education. Like seriously, I'm giving you free education. Can you not be an ass? That would be lovely. Anyways, but again, this is able to pull the IP address. This is simply using something like PHP to be able to pull what the visitor's IP address is. Once it's able to acquire that IP address, then it's able to pull out some information. Some of the information is correct. I am in the United States. I am in Maryland. Some information is incorrect. I'm not on a DSL service. So again, do remember it is simply querying a database. It's not very sophisticated technology going on here. Now, in order to use the API itself, you can go over here to the IP Geolocation API. You can click on this, and it will give you the information. So one of the interesting things here is kind of cool. Is you can actually just simply plug this into your web browser, and if you plug your API key and what IP address you're trying to resolve to, it'll actually just kind of spit that out as text on the top. So I actually have that in notes, right? So I have this nasty long thing here. So this is that api.infodb.com, blah, blah, blah. Here's my API key. Again, please do not steal my API key. It has the IP address attached to the end. If I do Control C, Oh, we can go back, and just to give you an example of what the API actually does, I can simply hit enter, and this is what it returns, right? So OK gives me the IP address I'm querying. It says, OK, it's in the United States, it's in California, it's in San Francisco, lat, long, all that type of information. So if you just want to make sure that the API is working at all, this is something you can do. You can simply plug this in, again, with your own API key, with the IP address, and it will simply give you the results like this. So again, it's kind of one of those interesting things. They give you some more information here. They give you some information about the parameters, so on and so forth. Again, you do get 2 queries per second. If you go over that, they will spank you. And then if you go all the way down, one of the cool things is they give you a number of different examples. So this is the PHP example. They give you a C# example. They give you an ASP example and such. Now with the PHP example, all we're going to be doing is you're going to go here and you're going to download their example. So basically here you're going to be able to download, and when you go to download, so you can go to code and then you can download in a zip format, and then all you're going to be having is the 2 files. So you're going to be having the class.IPinfoDB.php and then the IPLocation.php script. You are then going to put these into a web accessible folder on your server. So basically var/www/html/ wherever, basically, so people can actually access the script, and then from there you'll be able to access it. Once we have put that onto our server, so if we go and we actually take a look at the server, basically I've put this script into its own folder on the server. So if we go over here and take a look at IoT. So IoT is my server. I simply have a share here, and what we can see is what I did is I simply created a folder within that HTML root directory called GeoIP, and I put the IP location script there. So when I go here, what you can see is, again, 192.168.125. Then I have the folder GeoIP, and then within that is the IP location.php script. So with that, let's go and actually take a look at the script itself. So the first part of the script here is actually where I've simply created a little form. So this is H2, where's the server? I've created a form. I've created an action. So the action is simply going to be sending the post value simply back to itself. So the name of the script is the IP location.php. So I'm simply going to be sending this information back to the script itself. The method is going to be post. I'm simply going to say domain, input type equals text, name equals domain, input type equals submit. So if we go here and we take a look, basically, where's the server, domain, here's the text box, and then we have submit. So this is what we initially get. Then we're going to go down. We're actually going to take a look at the PHP script itself. So over here, we're going to open PHP. We are going to require class.ipinfo.db.php. So this is that's the other script that you have to download and have within the same folder. Now, it is important to understand to actually go through and take a look at scripts like this to verify what's going on. If you go and you take a look, you can see that there's nothing too wonky going on. So we have response, file get contents. It's going to be accessing their API with the key, so on and so forth. So again, something to be thinking about when you're using people's APIs and you're downloading people's code is just very quickly go through and audit and make sure you understand what it's doing, that it's not trying to grab more information about your server. Again, something to think about from a hacking standpoint is somebody can put, free software out there for you to download onto your server, and it may provide a service for you, but if it's also doing things such as grabbing extra information about your server, that might be bad. So anyways, that simply has to be added to the script. So we're going to require that. Then what we're going to do down here is we're going to get the domain from the form. So the form that was submitted up in this domain. So domain, $domain is going to equal post domain, so whatever gets posted. So if the domain is not empty, right? So basically here we can see domain is empty. So since domain is empty, I don't want all this additional information down here, and I also don't want any errors from variables or anything like that. So basically, if it's empty, just print this out and don't do anything else. If it's not empty, give us everything else that we want. So if domain is not basically empty, then result, basically what we're going to do is result, and we're going to do shell_exec, and we're going to do ping space -c space 1. So what this is going to say is ping once. So this is important in the Linux world. If you're used to the Windows world, in the Windows world, you ping a domain, it'll ping 4 times and then it'll stop. In the Linux world, it'll just keep pinging until it either hits whatever limit you've given it or you force it, you manually stop. So what we're going to simply do here is we're going to simply ping once. So all I want to do is I want to ping whatever domain name it is once. I don't actually really care about the ping result. What I care about here is to resolve the IP address to the domain name that I've given, right? So that's essentially what's going on. Then what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to then extract the IP address from the results. So basically shell exec ping, the value of this is going to go into the variable result. And then we're going to go through, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab out some information from those results. So when you do the ping command, there's a whole bunch of text that pops out from that ping command. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a match. So basically what we're going to be looking for is we're going to say, look for a domain with and everything between bytes. So I wish I could actually show this to you. Let's see here. Let's see if I do ping, let's say facebook.com here. And then again, I do Control C to stop. So basically, what I'm going to be looking for here is everything between domain and bytes. So basically, I want to grab all of this and then filter the rest out is what I'm going to be doing. And then what we're going to do down here is we're going to do the IP address, and then we're going to implode the IP address that we have here. So basically with this, with the pattern match, is we're going to grab the value that I showed you out of result, and then we're going to assign that value to IP address. And that IP address is then going to become an array. So that IP address, this variable now is going to be an array. What I want to then do is I'm then going to implode the array. This is kind of weird. I'm going to implode the array. So I'm going to turn the array into a string. So I'm turning this IP address array into a string, and then I'm exploding it again. So one of the problems is the array that I'm giving here is not in the format that I want. So basically it gives me an array, but the array is in a format that I don't really want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that array into a string, and then I'm going to return it back into an array in the format that I want. So in the format that I want everything with basically a space between it to be its own value in an array. And then what I know is that basically at the 1 position in that new array that I've created, that is going to be where the IP address is. So then in the 1 position for the IP address array here, I'm going to assign that value to a variable IP. And then for IP, I'm going to left trim. So basically I'm going to trim off the left parenthesis, then I'm going to right trim off the right parenthesis, and so that's going to give me just my pure IP address. Again, this is kind of one of those things, if you're not really sure what's going on here, play around with it. Because basically what you can do is you can do things like echo things or do like var dumps. So let's say here I could do I could simply do a var dump and then do IP address. So I could simply do this var dump here, so I can kind of get an idea of what this variable, this array looks like. So I can hit save. We can go. Again, I can do, let's say, facebook.com. I can hit submit. And then we'll get the var dump so we can see what the IP address looks at that particular situation, right? So basically here, what I want to show you is, so with this pattern match, it's going to pull out this information from result, and then it's going to put the value into an array for IP address. And if I take a look at this, see I have an array, but this array isn't very useful for me. So at the 0 position, essentially, I have all of this information, and that's not useful. So then what I want to do, right? So I can come here, and what I can do is I can do echo. Now let's do break, just so you understand what's going on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do var dump, and then I'm going to do IP address, right? So basically I'm going to var dump IP address again. And then we get to see what it looks like at that point, right? So basically here, the IP address is going to be an array. And so we var dump it as an array. We're then going to implode the array, turn it into a string. So we're then going to var dump again to understand what that looks like. So we're going to continue. Let's do Facebook again, facebook.com again. Okay, so then, see, this is the first var dump. We have an array. So then we implode that array. We then turn it into a string. So now we have this string. So now what I want to do is I want to turn it back into an array, but I'm going to have the array be wherever there's a space, right? So if we go down here then, so we're going to do IP address explode wherever there's a space. And then what we're going to do, again, echo a break in here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do var dump IP address again, right? And then we're going to hit file, then we're going to hit save, and then we're going to go here. Again, we're going to do facebook.com again. So then we now get it back to an array. So initially we have an array. But I can't really do anything useful with this array. So then I'm going to turn it into a string. Again, it's still not very valuable as a string. What I really wanted is an array. So then I'm turning it back into an array. But what you'll now see is that the 0 position is facebook.com. At the 1 position is now an IP address. At the 2 position is the bytes. At the 3 position is the actual, just the word bytes, so on and so forth. So basically now what I can do is I can now call position 1 in the IP address array, and that is going to get me this IP address here, right? And then once I have that, then all I need to do is I need to left trim off, right, the left parenthesis, and I need to right trim off the right parenthesis, and then I just have a pure IP address. So that's basically what's going on there. And so this is an important thing to be thinking about whenever you do troubleshooting routines, is to go in and do things such as do var dumps and understand what your variables look like during the transformation process. Because many times what happens is you will try to transform a variable in a way that doesn't really work the way you think it does, and then that's why you're getting the problems. If you do these var dumps, then you can say, okay, so this is how the variable looks, and this is how the variable looks, and this is how the variable looks, so on and so forth, right? So anyway, so that's how we then get our IP address. We're then simply going to echo out what the domain is that we're querying. We're then going to echo out what the IP address it resolved to. Then down here, this is where you plug in your API key. So again, please don't steal this. Please, I'm giving you free education here, man. Come on now. So this is the API key that you would put in there. Again, in order to create an account with these folks, it is very simple. All you have to do is you go over here to log in, you then go to create an account, you plug in your information, and again, within 30 seconds, you will have an account. So the account that they give you is very easy to get. There's not a lot to it. So just get your own account and then plug in your API key here. Then what we're going to do down here is we're going to get country information only. And so basically result equals, and this is what they have going on, and we're going to plug in the value for IP, right? So this value that we got here, that is going to get plugged in here. Then we're going to come down here and it's going to say country code, and then result is country code. Now, one of the things that I will tell you, what's very, very weird, but again, something you'll get used to in the real world of technology, is when you download their example, their initial example did not work for me. So basically, when you're referencing the result, they had the hyphen arrow and then said country code. So it said result hyphen arrow country code, result hyphen arrow country name. That actually did not work for me. I had to reference this in my code as the key, the named key in the array. So result name key of country code, result name key of country name. So I did have to modify that a little bit. So just something to keep in mind. If you're looking at their demonstration code and it looks a little bit different than my demonstration code, what I've done here is I'm now basically querying those named keys instead of what they have in their initial code. Then we're going to come down here for some of the more of the information. Again, country code. So it's going to give the country code, the country name, the region name, the city name, the zip code, the latitude, the longitude, the time zone. And again, with all of this, I am referencing the named keys. Let me see if I can go over to the download folder. Just so I can show you, again, in the download folder for IP location, this is what the demonstration actually looks like when you download it. Again, here's your API key. Everything's a little bit more basic. You'll notice here, again, result, and then they do the arrow country code, result, arrow country name, so on and so forth. You'll see how they're using this arrow here. This did not work for me. For whatever reason, honestly not quite sure, this did not work for me here. So that's where, if you notice in my code, I'm referencing the named key in the array. So just something to keep in mind. Then we're going to come down here, and then we're going to simply be echoing out the var dump. So this is, I'm going to be just doing a var dump of results, so you get an idea of what the array looks like. So we can go here. We can go back, and again, let's say we can do cnn.com, and then we can hit submit. And okay, so now what we have here, again, domain cnn.com, IP address is that IP address, country code, country name, then we have the country code and country name again, and then we have all this additional information. Then down here we have the var dump, so this shows us that we have an array, and these are all the different values in the array that you could reference, and that is basically how this particular project works. If you want to clean it up a little bit, again, you could simply comment out that var dump in the end. If you don't want to show that to your users, you could click save. And if we go again, we can do alibaba.com, see where that resolves to. So if we do that now, again, we get rid of the var dump at the bottom, alibaba.com, 198.11.132. This is actually resolving supposedly to the US, San Mateo, at that particular zip code. So that's what this project looks like. Again, we are using the IPinfoDB API, very easy to use. All you have to do is you can create an account, you click on login, you create an account, you can create a free account, again, in about 30 seconds or a minute, and you can start using the service. If you don't want to get all the way down into playing around with the actual code, again, here, you can actually just simply plug this information into the address bar of your web browser, and it will give you some basic information about what you're doing. So it'll spit all of this out as simple text to kind of give you an idea that the API itself is working. So there you go. Now you have a little geographic IP, little web app to play around with. So there you go. And there's a little project for you to show you how to resolve IP addresses to actual geographic locations. I think this is a valuable thing to be thinking about in the modern world of current geopolitics. Yay, right? With everything going on, it's becoming more and more important to understand where your data resides on the cloud, right? A lot of folks just think, oh, the cloud, as if there's not an actual physical location, that there's not really, bare metal servers sitting somewhere that are providing services for you. The cloud is a good abstract thing just when you're trying to design projects or infrastructure. But in reality, there really are actual data centers, there are actual servers, there's actual networking equipment, and all of that is somewhere. It may be in Italy, it might be in the United States, it might be in China. And so for your particular organization, it may matter. Again, if you're a healthcare provider, if you're dealing with people's personal information, credit card information, that type of thing, if the servers that you're interacting with are in China or somewhere else, and I'm not getting in the middle of this, but if they're somewhere else, that may be an issue from a regulatory standpoint. So having a little project like this, just to try to figure out where your servers are actually physically located, might be a useful thing. So this is something that you can play around with. Again, it's pretty easy. All you need is a basic understanding of PHP. You just need a basic LAMP server. So you just need Apache and you need PHP. You don't actually need MySQL or anything else. You simply write out the code, you throw it up, you have it connect to that InfoDB, that API that I showed you how to connect to, and then you're able to pull the geographic location of the IP addresses. So with this, you can then start taking this and then you can start modifying it and editing it for your particular projects. So you might want to do something such as log the IP addresses of people that come to your website to try to understand like where people are in the world that come to your website. So to possibly do things such as when you start doing advertising campaigns, understanding the demographics of your user base to know where you should focus your advertising spend on. So what you could do is when people come to your website, you could simply log their IP address, and then as long as you don't query more than twice every second, then you could very slowly just have your script go through and try to figure out, okay, where is this IP address from, and then where is this IP address from, and then where is this IP address from. That is one thing to realize when you're doing projects like this, is do remember you don't have to do things in real time, right? So if you're getting a lot of traffic to your website, you may not want to resolve geographic locations to IP addresses in real time, because if you did that, you would overload the API. So what you could do, right, is simply log the IP addresses with a timestamp and then have your script go back later and basically, let's say every second, have it resolve an IP address. So it's just 24 hours a day, it's just resolving IP addresses, dunk, 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 dunk. That way it's continuously resolving those IP addresses to give you a report on where people are coming from, but it's not in real time, so it doesn't overload the API. Right? Those are the kinds of things that you have to be thinking about. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting with this project is, again, the whole idea of the whole text transformation and how are you going to pull the text out of results, such as the shell exec, that you actually need, right? So with the shell exec, you can do ping, and so if you ping a domain name, it'll pull out an IP address. But it's going to pull out an IP address and a whole bunch of other information too. So one of the things you have to be thinking about is how to parse all that information. Okay, I've got all this information. How can I actually get exactly what I want out of here? So that's where you do things such as, okay, so you pull this amount of information out, and then that's in an array, and then you're going to implode the array, so you turn the array into a string, and then you turn that string back into an array, because when you turn it back into an array, now the IP address is going to be sitting very nicely at one of the key locations, and then once you can pull that IP address out, again, you left trim a little bit off here, you right trim a little bit off here, and hey, look, voila, you have an IP address. You have something that you can actually use. So again, text transformation can be a very useful thing, and so it's something that you need to be thinking about with your particular projects. The only final thing here is, again, the code that I'm giving you. So down in the doobly-doo on EliTheComputerGuy.com, this all works very well for me. I have not had any issues with it. Again, it's a little slow when you use our API. It's a little slow. Just understand it's a little slow. But otherwise, the code, as I showed you today, works perfectly fine for me. Do realize when you download their code directly off of their website with those hyphen arrows and some other things within their code, when I downloaded it, just failed. Just failed. So just kind of keep that in mind. I would say copy my code and then go from there. So just kind of keep that in mind. Again, if you're going to be using anything like APIs, another thing just to realize is many times the demonstration code that they give you is broken. There's nothing more frustrating or really more common than literally having these companies have demonstration or example code that you can download that doesn't work. It's one thing to be frustrated when you write code and it's screwed up. It's a whole nother level of frustration when you literally download their example code and you're like, I don't. So anyways, just one of those things to keep in mind. My code at least works for me. It works on my server. If it doesn't work, maybe go take a look at the actual demonstration code. Maybe that would work on your server for some reason. But anyways, just one of those things to keep in mind. As always, I enjoyed doing this class. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. If you like the content that I create, please think about going to elithecomputerguy.com and becoming a member or donating. Please understand that all of the educational videos are in front of the paywall. That includes the videos, that includes the notes, the diagrams, and the code example. All of that is freely available and in front of the paywall. But if you want to watch opinion videos or if you want to be able to comment, you do need to become a member. Membership is $5 a month or $60 a year and gives you access to those opinion videos and the ability to comment. If you don't want to become a member, you just want to give a one-time donation, there's also a donate button where you can do that. Please understand, in order to provide the education that I am, it does cost money. Servers cost money, equipment costs money, travel costs money. All of these things cost a reasonable amount of money, and the fact of the matter is YouTube's advertising program no longer supports creators the way that it used to. So if you want these classes to continue to stick around and you find them to be valuable, please think about either becoming a monthly member or donating a few dollars for this project.